Mara woke up before the sun did. That was not unusual. She had been waking before the sun for 4 years, ever since she first came to work at Duskvale Palace. The palace did not wait for anyone, and neither did the floors. They needed to be clean before the important people walked on them, before the important people even thought about walking on them. She pulled on her gray dress in the dark, tied her hair back, and looked down at her shoes. The left heel had a strip of electrical tape around it. She had put it there 3 months ago at 3 in the morning because the sole was separating and she could not afford the cobbler. She pressed it down now with her thumb, the way she did every morning, just to make sure it was holding. It was. She went to work. The marble floors of the East Corridor took 40 minutes to clean properly, not 30, 40. Mara had learned this in her first week, and she had never cut the time short since. She moved her mop in long, even strokes, working from the far end toward the door, the way you were supposed to, the way most people did not bother to do when no one was watching. No one was ever watching Mara. She preferred it that way. She finished the corridor, cleaned the library, polished the brass handles on the study doors, and was gone before the first bell rang. She ate a small breakfast in the servants' quarters, bread, a hard egg, tea that had been sitting too long, and then she heard the announcement that changed everything. The palace was holding a presentation. Alpha Caius Aldrin, ruler of the Duskfall Pack, was selecting a mate. All eligible female wolves within the pack's territory had been considered. A short list had been prepared. Mara's name somehow was on it. She read the paper 3 times. Then she folded it and put it in her pocket and went back to work, because the West Corridor still needed sweeping. She thought about it all day. She was not the kind of woman who got selected for things. She was the kind of woman who made sure the rooms were ready for the women who got selected for things. There had to be an error. There was probably an error. She would go, because not going would create problems, and Mara had spent her entire life carefully avoiding problems. She pressed her gray dress that night with a borrowed iron and hung it on the hook behind her door. She looked at her shoes. She had no other shoes. She pressed the electrical tape down again. It was holding. The morning of the presentation, Mara walked up the marble stairs she had cleaned 100 times and entered the great hall through the main doors for the first time in her life. She always used the servants' entrance on the left side, the one with the sticky latch and the draft in winter. Walking through the main doors felt strange, like wearing someone else's clothes. There were 17 women in the hall. Mara looked at them and understood immediately that she was different from all of them. Not worse, necessarily, just different. The others wore dresses that had names, dresses made by people whose job was making dresses. Their hair had been arranged by other hands. They stood with the particular ease of people who had always been allowed to take up space. Mara stood straight and kept her hands still, and did not let any of it show on her face. She noticed, standing there, that the chandelier on the east side had 6 dead crystals on its lower arm. She had mentioned it twice in her cleaning reports. No one had fixed it yet. Then the doors opened, and Alpha Caius walked in. The room changed when he entered. Mara felt it before she saw it. A shift in the air, something pulling downward, the way the atmosphere changes before a storm. The women around her adjusted without meaning to. Spines straightened, breath went shallow. A quiet ripple moved through the hall, some deep animal instinct telling every wolf in the room that the most powerful one had arrived. Mara felt it too. She did not move. She noticed that she did not move, and she filed this away as interesting. Caius moved down the line slowly. He was not unkind to the women he passed. He simply was not interested, and he did not pretend otherwise. He paused at a few of them. He asked one woman a question. He looked at another for a long moment before moving on. He reached Mara. He stopped. She watched his face and saw the exact moment he recognized her. It moved across his expression like a shadow, a very fast tightening around the eyes, a stillness that was not calm. He said quietly, "You." "Yes, Alpha," she said. "You clean my library," he said. "And your study," she said, "and the East Corridor, for 4 years." The hall was completely silent. Caius looked at her for 3 more seconds. Then he looked at the guard beside him and said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "Remove her." The guard came. Mara did not make it difficult. She had learned early in life that making things difficult only extended them, and she wanted this over. She walked out through the servants' entrance. Of course it was the servants' entrance. It was always the servants' entrance. And down the hill and through the main gate. Her bag was thrown out after her. It landed on its side, and her spare dress fell out onto the road. She picked it up, she shook the dirt off carefully, she folded it and put it back in the bag. She stood on the road outside the palace she had cleaned for 4 years, and she thought, well, that happened. Then she started walking. She found a room at a small inn near the eastern edge of Duskfall territory. She paid for 3 nights with the last of her wages. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall and took stock of what she had. Some clothes, a small knife she carried out of old habit, a little book of moon prayers she had carried since she was 9 years old and did not fully believe in anymore, and a very specific skill, the skill of being useful in spaces where no one noticed you, of doing work that mattered without needing anyone to say so. She did not cry. She was not the kind of person who cried easily, not because she had no feelings, but because she had learned a long time ago that feelings needed to wait until you had solved the practical problem in front of you. The practical problem right now was that she needed work. She found it 3 villages away, at the home of a healer named Set. Set was an older Omega woman with sharp eyes and a cluttered house, and more herbs drying in her windows than Mara had ever seen in one place. She asked Mara almost nothing. She looked at her for a long moment during the first meeting, the way certain old people look at you, like they are reading something written in a language most people have forgotten, and then she said, "You can start tomorrow." Life with Set was quiet and full of work and surprisingly peaceful. Mara cleaned and organized and learned the names of herbs she had never heard of. She helped Set prepare medicines. She made tea at the right times without being asked, because she was good at noticing what a space needed before anyone said it out loud. She began waking at the exact moment the full moon peaked each night. She did not know why. She would simply open her eyes, and the room would be full of silver light, and she would feel, for a few minutes, like something large and quiet was looking at her, with great attention. Then the feeling would pass, and she would go back to sleep. She mentioned none of this to Set, but she noticed that Set watched her sometimes, in the evenings, with an expression that was not quite a smile, and not quite something else. 3 months after Mara arrived, Set told her about the ceremony of alignment. It happened once every 10 years, Set explained. All wolves gathered under the full moon. The high priest led the rites. The moon goddess, Lunara, the old ones called her, was said to move through the ceremony, blessing bonds, confirming leaders, and very occasionally doing something that had no official name, but was recorded in the old texts as an intercession, a direct act, a correction. There were 3 documented intercessions in the entire history of the wolf realm. Caius's court would attend. The mate candidates would attend. The general public was also welcome. Common wolves stayed in the outer rings, which spread out in wide circles from the ceremony dais at the center. "You should come," Set said. Mara said she would rather not. Set looked at her with those sharp eyes and said, "Daughter, you should come." Mara had not been called daughter by anyone in 11 years. She went. The outer ring was crowded. Families, laborers, elderly wolves who had attended the last ceremony a decade ago and talked about it constantly since. Mara stood near the back of the outer ring and could not see much of the dais, but she did not mind. She was not there for the dais. She was there because Set had asked her to come, and because Set had called her daughter, and because some things you simply did without being able to explain why. The ceremony began at moonrise. The high priest's voice carried clearly across the grounds. The formal rites were read. The mate candidates were presented at the dais. Caius stood tall and composed in the center, looking exactly like what he was, a powerful man completely at home in his own power. Mara watched from the outer ring and felt a clean, quiet kind of peace. Whatever she had once almost been a part of felt very far away now, and the distance was not painful anymore. It was simply distance. Then the moon moved. Not the way clouds move it, not the way the eye tricks itself at night. It moved the way things move when they mean to. The entire crowd felt it at the same moment, and went silent at the same moment, thousands of wolves holding their breath as one. A pillar of light came down from the moon to the earth. It did not touch the dais. It did not touch the inner rings, where the nobles and the powerful stood in their formal clothes. It came to the outer ring. It came to Mara. The light was not hot. It was not like standing in fire or even standing in strong sunlight. It was warm, the way it feels when someone finally understands something you have been trying to say for a long time. A warmth that starts in the chest and moves outward. Mara stood completely still. A voice arrived, not through her ears, but somewhere behind them, or beneath them, somewhere inside the chest where the most honest things live. Every wolf in that field received it in the same place, at the same moment. "This one," the voice said, "this one is mine." Something descended from the light onto Mara's head. She did not have a word for it in the moment. It felt like weight, like the particular and serious weight of being responsible for something. Not a burden, but a gravity, the kind that comes with being trusted by something much larger than yourself. When the light pulled back and the night returned to normal, Mara was standing in the outer ring in her gray dress and her electrical tape shoes, and on her head was a circlet of pale silver. The crowd was absolutely still. Then the high priest, who had been doing this work for 30 years and had never expected to see this in his lifetime, lowered himself to his knees. The wolves nearest the outer ring followed, then the next ring, then the next, inward, like a wave moving in reverse, away from the dais, toward her. Thousands of wolves on their knees in the moonlit field, and the movement did not stop until it reached the very center. Until it reached Caius. He was looking at her. Mara did not look back. Not because she was making a point, not because she wanted him to feel it. She simply did not need to. Whatever was on her head, whatever had just happened, had nothing to do with him. It had nothing to do with the presentation, or the marble floors, or the road outside the gate, where her spare dress had spilled out into the dirt. It was older than all of that. She thought about the electrical tape on her left shoe. She thought about the small book of moon prayers she had carried since she was 9 and had almost stopped believing in. She thought about Set calling her daughter. The crowd stayed on their knees. Mara stood in the outer ring, under the open sky, and let the silver weight of the circlet sit on her head, and she breathed in, and she breathed out, and the moon above her was still and full and bright and absolutely present. Later that night, she walked back to Set's house. 3 worn stone steps up to the front door, herbs drying in the window, the same door with the same creak at the top of the swing that she had meant to oil for a month. She climbed the steps. Her shoes still had electrical tape on the left heel. She had not changed them. She would, eventually. There was no rush. She went inside. Set was sitting at the small table with 2 cups of tea already made, and waiting. She looked at the circlet on Mara's head for a long moment, and then she looked at Mara's face, and something in her eyes was very soft. Neither of them said much. There was not much that needed saying. Outside, through the little window above the sink, the moon was still up, still visible, still as it turned out, very much paying attention. Mara wrapped both hands around her cup of tea, and felt the warmth move into her palms, and she sat in the quiet kitchen of a woman who had called her daughter, and she let the night be exactly what it was. A beginning. A real one. The kind you do not get by asking for it. The kind that finds you in the outer ring, in a gray dress, in broken shoes, doing the quiet and necessary work of simply continuing, and decides that you are exactly the one it has been looking for.